Good afternoon, everyone. Like I said, I'm just so happy to see everyone out. And today's topic seems to be an interesting one. I love that we're going to go through and talk about the fight against massive data centers. So, over the last decade, we witnessed, kind of this, move to kind of standard data centers to these large-scale, massive data centers, and different technologies have been invented and developed to make these things happen. But today we are seeing kind of the impact of those. We built a good number of them here in Atlanta. We have a large number as well. And probably in some of your communities, you're starting to see these either have already been built or will be built or being built now. So we're going to explore the different aspects of that. But to kind of get things started, I'm going to introduce myself, and we're going to go down and see who's on our panel today, and then we'll get started. So my name is Xavier Ashe. I'm a 30 plus or so hacker and security enthusiast. I'm also a privacy enthusiast and work with EFGA and on several of our panels we've talked about a lot of privacy stuff today. But today here to really kind of dig into the issues of massive data centers. So pass it over to the first name.
All right, and I am 30 plus, way beyond 30s. In other panels, you've seen me introduce myself as a game developer and executive director of the Georgia Game Developers Association. I work for companies where we have our own server farms for players, but that is not why I am on this panel. I actually serve with a number of government bodies, including the DeKalb Economic Development Association, DeCAB. We've had these negotiations with data centers about coming on in, had great meetings with them over the past. So I am that guy who's been talking to data centers about coming here. No kidding? Come on, I want to boo and leave. Thank you. That's better.
Hey, so I'm Kurt Opsahl, the Associate General Counsel at the Filecoin Foundation, where we the civil policy. For that, I was at the Electronic Frontier Foundation for many years, where I was the General Counsel. The perspective I bring to this is that Filecoin is a distributed network, sort of peer-to-peer file sharing and storage play. And it has thousands of storage providers that allow people to store their stuff with them with mathematical proofs to show that they in fact are storing it and are going to get penalized. And so it is a way to distribute the load of storage to a lot of different places if you store it peer-to-peer away from the big companies who are putting together these massive data centers.
I'm Andrew Hirsch. I'm a professor of computer science at SUNY Buffalo, and I am a researcher in, among other things, how to build better distributed software, how to build better peer-to-peer software, and how networked applications can work better together without messing each other up.
All right. Well, I want to kind of start, kind of lay the groundwork right here. We talk about massive data centers. What is the difference between like normal data centers and massive data centers?
You've passed it on down the line. So it's been fascinating watching the change and the folks who are coming here to talk to us about these. It used to be these smaller groups that take over around 20, 30 acres of property to do a data center. That's what we considered amazingly huge. In DeKalb County, we don't have a lot of undeveloped land anymore. So trying to fit in something even 20 to 30 acres is problematic. Trying to find a place where, we've got these wonderful trunks of fiber running up and down I-20, 95. How many people are local? I'm sorry. How many people are, all right, good deal. So you'll know some of what I'm talking about. We got this wonderful fiber running everywhere. Great, DeKalb is packed with it. But finding place for this data center has been problematic. And it's been wonderful Atlanta seeing them go straight up in these in towers. But now these are 100 acres plus. These are tremendous. We've got obviously QTS building stuff here in town. What's that little company? Not MicroPros. That's one of my publishers way back when. Microsoft and of course the Facebook and the Amazon new ones coming in. These are all over 100 acres. They're tremendous tracts of land that you're trying to put together and will be covered in these giant buildings. And it's dramatically different from what we were seeing 10, even 5 years when they first started coming. 10 years ago, it was nothing like what we've done. So I will talk in terms of that size scale.
Any other comments? Or like differentiate?
Sure. I mean, I'll add another thing. Like One way is if you have a certain amount of data that needs to be stored in the world, then you're gonna have a certain amount of data centers or servers used to store it. One of the things about the massive data center is the concentration of them into one spot, into a very large spot, but sort of concentrated in. And this does create some different issues from a more distributed, concentrate uses of power in one location. And so that may cause local rates to go up for everybody. They may concentrate the use of water for the cooling systems. And so this creates at least a question for some of the data centers, the massive ones, of whether they will be overwhelming the local resources because of that concentration. In an urban area on the Karl, even a very massive one is still like in the context of an urban or suburban area. But there's also a sense of these data centers which are being put down where maybe there happen to be some fiber and power availability, but maybe low populations where it is having much more sort of outsized percentage impact on the local area.
Yeah, I mean the trade-off that we're really playing with here is all of these problems from concentration, and what do you get in return? Well, the closer things are together, the faster things go, right? This is true at every level of computer organization, from how the chips are organized, how you organize things in memory when you write software, up all the way through. If you have two data centers next to each other, they talk to each other faster. I have some friends who work in high frequency trading. You try to get computers as near to the trading floor as possible because it actually makes a difference when you're running at the speed of light. So that's kind of the trade-off that they're going for. And of course, one of the big questions is the trade-off worth it?
And I'd like to add really quickly for those locally, this is why we have this concentration of the skyscraper data centers in downtown Atlanta, and why we have fintech. We have all these data centers talking together closely along this massive fiber trunk that we have running through Atlanta. And that is why this has become transactionality, even more so than the New York Stock Exchange being headquartered in Atlanta. The New York Stock Exchange is headquartered in Atlanta because of our data access.
Yeah, I think it's Camp Creek / Thornton Road. If you ever drive that out of the Atlanta airport, just keep going all the way to where it curls around I-20. You can see, just row after row of these, and if you've never really seen them before, they kind of look like military installations.
Some of them are.
Yeah, and because of the security concerns, there's a lot of concrete. And you look at it and you'll realize, hey, okay, that does not look the same as the rest of Atlanta. We've got lots of trees here, and this concrete jungle. So beyond just the the look and feel, we've caught on we touched on a couple of the negatives. But what is the big deal? I mean, so these are big, lots of servers. We like to play games and do social media. So don't we need these massive data centers?
About the other side? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can touch on a few things. One of the big ones is power, right? Power and water. They take in a lot of inputs, and they put a lot of stress on local communities. Now, I mean, there's been talk about doing things like creating nuclear power centers just for one data center. That's how much power we're talking about drawing. It's a lot. It's creating a lot of heat and just using up a lot of resources. You could also talk about GPUs. The GPU market is insane right now. If anybody works on games or works yet like special effects here in Atlanta, I imagine there's some special effects folks. It's hard to get your hands on those GPUs right now because all that stuff's going into those data centers.
And if you're not familiar, the reason why GPUs are just so crazy right now is the type of math that AI does, right? The underlying technology. If you're not an uber geek and you know exactly how AI works, if you're like me, you just pull up ChatGPT and you play with it, right? So what's going on in the back end is that the math that AI uses is very similar to the math that video games use. And that's why the GPUs, or the graphic processing units, those what we used to play or just buy to play video games, are now being used in the data centers to do all of this AI stuff. So that's why GPU market has exploded there.
And like NVIDIA, which is now one of the largest companies in the world because it sells these GPUs, started out as just a gaming company that you used for an accelerator, and it was respectable sized company.
I think this month it is the largest company in the world. Good.
All right, so like that would put something close to 4 trillion in market cap. Because by happenstance, they, for other reasons, had developed chips and boards and such that would be very good for purposes other than the purpose they were originally involved.
Yeah, we in games used to blame crypto for driving up the price, and not that damn AI thing. We're somewhere on this shirt. But it's very interesting seeing how communities are putting together deals for these data centers. Like I said, these are huge areas of land that have to all be contiguous. It can't be a part over here and a part over there. It all needs to be put together. And even in rural Georgia, this can be tricky to put together. So what we have been seeing more and more have been economic development centers, actually, or authorities putting together the land deal. And what often happens, it is the leading citizens in that community who are buying up the land and then reselling it at a markup because they know that data centers coming in order to get these massive I'll keep using the joke, these large tracts of land put together here in Georgia. And that, one of the things that I'm concerned about is the lack of discussions we've seen in some of these communities about these data centers coming in, because it has made community leaders who are profiting off of the sale of the land. So one of the first things we do want to be seeing more and more is the discussion of the value or lack of value to the community when these come on in. There are certainly a lot of good data centers being near you could provide. In economic development, we're often focusing in terms of jobs. The more jobs we have on a project, the better we like it. Unfortunately, we're talking about more than 100 acres. There's one here that's like 113 acres, and they were very proudly saying, we'll have 100 people working here. I can put 100 employees in a car lot on 1 acre. So the return on jobs is suddenly problematic. So number one, I would like to see more discussion about the harms and benefits within the community. And
One other important type of co-location, though, is to customers, right? You're trying to get this data computed as quickly as possible, but if it takes, a second to get to you, it doesn't matter that I computed it in 0.2 milliseconds as opposed to 0.4 milliseconds, right? Nobody cares. So that is one of the reasons they're putting it in big metropolises like Atlanta, like New York. I mean, New York City has these things. Virginia, a lot of them are near DC. Why? Because that's where the customers are, and they're trying to get that data to you as quickly as possible. But in order to do that, they're using a bunch of the land that is very profitably, and I use that both in the normal economic sense and in the purely financial sense, put to other use, right?
Well, and often we see, like when you're talking about that, is the tax deals that are given to the companies. And so is this, like I said, when we talk about benefits versus harm, are we seeing that being to help benefit the economy of the communities, or is the tax breaks really just to win the deal of the biggest customer?
I want to go back to your question.
Okay.
Is it? Do we need to store all of this data, or do we need to store a massive amount of data? And as a lawyer, I always come to the answer: it depends. But there are very good uses that we have made for storing data, and one is for preservation of our culture and society. That we have a very digital culture and society. And I've worked for many years with the Internet Archive. That's its job. I've been doing since the 90s, keeping a copy of the entirety of the Internet. The entirety of the Internet keeps on growing, but it is an amazing historical record. And if we lose the things that make up our culture and what is happening in a society today for future generations to see, to learn from, see what mistakes we made, maybe not replicate them, or at least to research how the past went, to understand what was happening now. You cannot understand today's modern society without seeing lots of the things that people have put on the web, things that, videos and things that represent what was going on. So that's one purpose for having a lot of data collection. There's also a lot of scientific purposes having for like weather modeling to look at the what we can learn about the future weather for climate change issues, for just predicting the weather nearby, requires lots and lots of data being collected about the weather and then analyzed at a very large level. Also for some biotechnology things like analyzing the human genome, from which we might get some ways to cure diseases. So, there is a need to have a fair amount, pretty large amount of data. Some of the question is how to do it well, how to do it in a way that is best for our society. And there might be some categories of data that aren't as important to keep around. Ones as a privacy advocate is all the data being collected about you, perhaps without explicit consent, and then being used perhaps against your interests. Many of those companies who are collecting that, I would appreciate it if they collected a lot less of it and have to store a lot less. Okay.
I mean, there's such a thing. The metaphor is often used of pre-1940s steel. Right, pre-1940s steel is very, very precious, especially if it's buried in the ocean, because it has less damage due to the nuclear radiation that's in our atmosphere due to the atomic bomb. That is starting to happen to data. The invention of LLMs is leading to a situation where there is a ton of data on the internet that is written by LLMs. But if you want to train a new AI, you don't want to train on data that came out of a previous version. This causes your AI to basically fall apart. So there's a premium now on pre-LLM data. If you can find new data that was written, new text that was written before LLMs came out, so that this was written by a human, or any text you can find that was written by a human. This is now starting to become a premium, and it's kind of disturbing how much of that is being used to create these AIs. And I guess one question that it would be easy to shy away from, but I'm not sure we should, is the way that these AIs working worth collecting all of the data that has been written about in any public place on the internet in one place and processing it like that? Because I'm not sure I buy that it is.
And I think both of you are hitting a great point. That one of the concerns we have, and that is not voiced enough, is the purpose of massive data centers. We don't need massive data centers to do most of the public health research that's being handled. I mean, most of us would say, yes, we want data centers to handle public health. Apparently, there's some folks who don't agree with that. But most sane people say that we want those data centers for that purpose. On the other hand, we want that for generating all this AI that we're concerned that we're not going to see a great deal of value from. But we see the value the data center companies are putting on this. There's the most recent deals in rural Georgia. We're seeing the land going at $400,000 an acre. Rural land, undeveloped land in Georgia going for $400,000 an acre is something I would have never expected to see in my lifetime. Not even Kia is spending anything near this when they're putting together giant manufacturing plants, but the data centers are paying this. And then on top of that, they're paying even more for the actual development that's going in there. We want to talk about costs. We know that there are deaths on the job site. The QTS site, I'm aware of at least 2 deaths on the job site already. So there's human costs going into these as well. So the companies are seeing massive value in these. And is that coming from what we are going to be getting as citizens from the value, or is it them? Now, we do have to admit that part of what they're doing is building future capacity. There's no denying they're building now. What they're seeing is the 2030 capacity. But a lot of it is for what they are going to be generating right now with that land. And is that something that we, as the population impacted by the data centers, are we benefiting from?
So you bring up the future capacity. I think is actually a really, really cool and important point. One issue that we're seeing right now is companies are not seeing a return on investment in AI yet. Their AI is still a place where companies are spending way more money than they're making. In fact, they're making practically nothing. And the few companies that have tried to turn this into a business model have found it very, very hard. And so there's a real possibility here that we build these giant data centers, eat up all this land, build all this stuff, and then the companies that are doing it move on to the next hot thing. and that building's still there. What happens then?
Right, and because they're purpose built now, is you know, like I said, you drive past seeing the new ones. It used to be the data centers were just that ugly building that nobody wanted to go. Just it was a nondescript building that they built out. But now it's like I said, it's purpose built. So it's not like we can just hey, let's turn this into a playground, right? But one of the things is that as we drive this, like I said, there's lots of money going into this because of AI. There's new technologies that are being developed and to support these. The other day I heard about the starting up low yield nuclear power for data centers, and so I wanted to open that up. Just these type of technologies. Is this or is this like the next big thing that's going to really change the world and the way that we handle power and data management? Or is this we opening up a can of worms?
So one of the things that's reminded some news a while back where Microsoft was investing billions in reopening a closed power plant, nuclear power plant, for these AI purposes. Now, I think nuclear power has been a controversial issue over time because of some of the safety concerns, like if it goes wrong and you have like a Chernobyl or Three Mile Island kind of incident. Though I think over time we've actually gotten better at doing safe nuclear power, but it is still very challenging to build nuclear power plants. They're an expensive proposition. So the interesting side effect of this incredible desire for power for AI might be moving to more nuclear power. And one of its great advantages is it doesn't have carbon emissions. It is a way to source power that can be much better for climate or the smog in areas around power plants. And then what Xavier was just talking about is, in addition to restarting big plants that have been shut down, is people working on technologies. I don't know the name of it, but it was trying to make a nuclear power that you could have fit in a container or two.
Modular nuclear power, I believe is what it's called.
Small modular reactor.
Yeah, there we go.
And this also allows for distribution of power so it doesn't have to be right next to a big generator. Because also like electricity has some resistance over as a transport. So you want to locate. If you need a lot of electricity, you want to locate pretty close to the source. But if you could distribute the source with these modular nuclear power, that could reduce the pressure of having it all in one spot. 400,000 an acre, because that's just a prime spot for the confluence of fiber and power and building land. And that might be a better way to deal with these growing storage capacity needs.
Well, and one of the possibly really good side effects of this whole thing is we might end up with a regulatory regime that is much, much friendlier to nuclear power in general and to these small modular reactors in particular, which would be probably very good for the environment, good for the United States, and good for humanity. So I think, I'm putting my cards on the table, I suppose. I'm a nuclear power fan. I think it would be good for that to come about. And right now, the regulatory regime is too hard on those things.
Okay, well, I'll go and throw out the flip side of it. One of the other major issues we have is the waste generation and the waste disposal for this. Many of you may not know this, but there used to be a nuclear reactor in downtown Atlanta. They only closed down the nuclear reactor at Georgia Tech when the Olympics came here. So, within our life, certainly within my life. So, one of the concerns we're hearing in general about massive data centers is the waste generation, excess heat being one of them. But a community then hears that there is going to be radioactive waste generated there because there is waste that has to be dealt with. Now, what's the reaction from the community? Is it being kept on site there? Are you going to be transporting it off? And suddenly you have different reactions on both of those with a lot of local negativity. And on top of that, we're not talking about Atlanta, where there is actually emergency personnel who are trained to deal with these situations. You are talking something about rural Georgia. Is it just going to be a team on site dealing with it? Unlikely. How is the local emergency services? How are they trained to handle this? Do they have any capacity to deal with it? Are they funded to deal with it? We're suddenly dealing with several magnitudes of issues that aren't being considered. And frankly, I think we're going to see some of the data centers wanting to retrofit for their energy generation as, I mean, Georgia Power is talking right now about what level of capacity they'll be at. I mean, there were interesting discussions at the last PSC hearings, disagreements between staff and industry about what they can do and what they can supply going forward.
I mean, and this is all assuming that they actually do go forward with some of these nuclear plants. I was living in Germany when the Green Party took over and dismantled all their nuclear power plants, and they claimed, "Oh, we're going to go all green." But what did they do instead? They reopened the coal power plants. Right? The Green Party reopened the coal power plants.
It's like clean coal, right?
Yeah. But, you know,
There's a difference between a temporary.
Well, the name is green and green party. They formed a group like
They're forging on the green.
Yeah. But the real danger here is that they won't be able to get the approval for these nuclear things, or one real danger is that they won't be able to get that. And all of those problems, or a lot of them, still come about if they end up using nuclear power, or coal power as well, which is a very real possibility.
Of course, as we're going off on the nuclear tangent, we've got the issue we saw in Georgia with the building of the new nuclear plant here, and just how long that took compared to promise, how much more expensive that was, and how much it is driving up every ratepayer's bill, and how long it's going to take to pay that back. This has not been implemented to the level yet that we know exactly what the cost will be, and in many ways, these data centers will likely be the guinea pigs, not the place where tested solutions are implemented.
Absolutely. So we're going to continue the conversation up here. If any of you guys have any particular questions, there is a mic in the middle. And so as we get folks lined up to there to do some questions, I want to kind of bring up, it's like, is there anything we can do, right? Kurt, you had brought up, the decentralization movement, right? For a long time, we were all about the SaaS, right? Getting all of our stuff into the cloud. And so now we're starting to see a movement away from that. And so, real quickly before we get to questions, is there things that we can do to kind of help fight against the massive data centers?
I'll bring up something you talked about before, was the tax break for these. Fulton County implemented one for Elon Musk's folks, I believe, for Twitter, for one of their data centers here. And is that a good use of incentives and the like? We want incentives to bring businesses here. Generally, it's in terms of job creation. That's not massive job creation. So that is a place where people locally can be informed and be involved in saying, hey, we want stuff that brings actually a high number of high-paying jobs, not just a few, less than one per acre.
All right, we'll go for our first question.
Can you help me understand why the consumers are now going to pay more for electric when all of these companies that have gazillions of dollars and are not going to pay taxes on these things are the ones building it? Because I don't get it.
Yeah, great question. And so, so the situation is, as these companies move in, they get particular deals with local power, and the balance of that investment, right, does sometimes hit consumers. And we're starting to see the outbreak. And so as we talk about the negative sides of things, is that's definitely, both of the water and the power, that does impact local communities. And knowing that beforehand, being able to understand that as your communities might be faced with this, is to get out and go to local hearings and get involved with the decision making, because it's crazy how much of government happens at a super local level, right? County, small cities, just municipalities. These are where some of these very strong decisions and where voicing these opinions is important. But is there any other comments?
Yeah, so business does supplement consumer costs. I mean, my business costs for electricity are higher than my consumer costs for electricity. However, we are all having to pay for the capacity. So we are all paying in advance for that nuclear power plant that got built here, which is a big shift in how Georgia used to handle it. Georgia Power used to build these, and then over time we pay it back. Once they had taken on the initial risk, that didn't happen this time. So everybody is now paying for the capacity that we don't think we need, that is being demanded because they're here. So it's not the generation that's the issue. It's not that our particular price per kilowatt is going up. It's that the price for building all this new capacity is being spread out on us as well as those businesses. So the question is, can we get the data centers to take on more of that capacity issue? And that has not been decided yet.
Okay, next question.
So I actually, in my professional capacity, am fighting hyperscale data centers. I work for an environmental group in Alabama, and it's interesting to hear kind of the model that's been used here, which is packaging deals to then go to Meta, Facebook, Google, whoever, and offer them this property. In Alabama, what we're seeing is actually something kind of the opposite, where local municipalities are being approached oftentimes indirectly, oftentimes by law firms or property developers that do not have an ultimate customer and are basically, they're the ones trying to put together the package, right? And so that to me seems like a much more speculative model, right? Because you're essentially saying, I'm going to put together a data center package, but I don't have a data center customer yet. And so, hearing about $400,000 an acre for farmland in rural Georgia, could you talk a little bit more about kind of, I don't want to use the word bubble, but kind of the speculative nature of some of these investments that are happening, and the very real possibility that at least some studies have indicated that we don't even necessarily have the chip capacity to reach the megawatt levels that the utilities are forecasting in their IRPs.
So putting together these land deals is not new in economic development. EA plans, things like that, local communities say, all right, we figured out a way to combine this much property together, that's the value. Let's go to the State Department of Economic Development, let them know we have it, and let's see if they can find someone to bring it here. Usually it's the state that brings these big Kia customers to a location. They've got to know where they've got the land before they can even talk to Kia. And then Kia sends their site folks out to visit all the different ones and say, okay, this one is the one that most fits our need. What we're starting to see now, however, is what you're talking about, this speculative nature that's not being done by local economic development, where it is folks who are coming and say, all right, we know the data centers want it. Let's put it together and then we'll go find it. Cutting out economic development, that's a pro or a con. I'm not going to say it's good or bad either way. There are reasons to and reasons not to. But the economic development authorities are quasi-governmental, so there is some governmental input into it. The other issue is when it is just the leading citizens with a law firm fronting them, going after these companies and saying, all right, we're putting this here. And then getting city council members say, oh, yes, absolutely, whatever you say. So it's not new, but it is the question of, are we trying to do something for the good of the community, or are we trying to do something good for our pocketbook? And usually it's both, but now that's the fear that it's definitely not going to be for both. Those jobs aren't going to be going to people in that city in Alabama.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, so piggybacking a little bit on what the question the first lady had, but is there if we want to address the external consequences of the data centers, is there a regulatory framework or something that we can get behind that says, okay, look, I don't care that they want to build these, but I don't want to pay for the power plant. I don't want to pay for the water. Here's the framework of, if you want to do this, here's what you're going to have to do as a company if you want to build this, or how do we get that in place to go to our technologically illiterate state senators or whoever to say, here's what you should be doing as part of this.
So let me say, if what you're asking is anybody doing it right?
Yeah.
And that's a great question. Is there models out there, other places in the nation or in the world?
And how can I steal it?
Yeah, that might be doing this a little bit better.
So the solution is there. I mean, economic development authorities, when they put together these deals, will have specific rules in place. So I'll go back to jobs. Kia comes in, promises to bring this many jobs. There's a clawback mechanism in place to take those tax incentives away from them, get that money back if they don't actually put in that many jobs. So a community can say, if you're going to build this here, these are the things that we require. A lot of the utility stuff is happening at the PSC level, Public Service Commission. I'm only talking Georgia. I'm sorry for those of you who are not Georgia. I don't know those nearly as well. And the PSC has not set that in place. I mean, you can argue why, but it is a new issue for them to be trying to deal with. They could do a Kia where they knew what the impact would be, and Kia could really define it. It's different right now for the data centers. There's still too many unknowns that are not known. So, but there is a framework that can provide that solution. If you're going to be here, you do these things. or we have clawbacks to deal with you, or we have penalties that can be implemented, or if you go over this usage, you have to pay this escalating amount. I mean, that's our water bill. You have used up to 1,000 gallons, you pay this much, 2,000 this much, et cetera, et cetera. So those structures can be put in place, but they have to be put in on the front end, not back end.
Thank you.
Hi, y'all. I'm a DeKalb County citizen. So we just obviously came off the horrific Stop City that it didn't come in our favor.
Well, keep an eye on Hitchhiking Creek. There's interesting things that could happen there in the near future.
That's what I was wondering, the Black Hall Studios land swap that they're talking about, that may be a site of a data center. And we are, I will say neighbors and anyone else from DeKalb is probably concerned that would be a data center because we're afraid of the environmental consequences with South River and Franklin Creek Park. And I don't know, I was just wondering if that's on the list.
What Black Hole is looking to do down there is not to the massive level. And it's been interesting hearing those discussions about how do you retrofit a studio space for data centers. And there's some surprising complexities. But though this isn't on the scale of some of the things we talk about with Microsoft, it is always good to have those concerns, and let's keep an eye on specifically those. But it's not the Microsoft and the BTS and the rest of the people.
Meta trying to build a data center the size of Manhattan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a much more contained area, but always worth keeping a close eye on. And I mean, Ted Terry's trying to do some interesting things there.
Yeah, and we, as DeKalb citizens dealing with Atlanta selling there, and not listening to us at all, I know that you're on the board, so just
Yeah,
know
glad
that
to chat more about that.
we're
Absolutely.
very.
And again, I mean, the idea is government has the ability to put requirements in place to deal with these and penalties if they're not dealt with, and use those penalties to fund solutions that just have to be done.
And then just last thing, would what is happening in Memphis be possible to what's happening in Atlanta with their data center and the pollution that's occurring?
I'm actually not familiar with that.
I'll take that education. What you got?
What's going on in Memphis?
So Memphis is having a lot of air population. People are getting really sick from the data center that's been put over there. And they're trying to, and it's a very poor area of Memphis, so they don't have a lot of fight back. And I see the similarities with DeKalb County and what they're going through. So if anyone's more of an expert in it.
And they put up turbines, like turbines that are past what they were allotted and nothing has happened.
It's bad.
Embarrassing.
And we're very concerned that Atlanta, would love that happen to us. So thank you for your time.
Hello, I also live in the DeKalb County in Decatur. I'm curious, with Georgia's historical problems with access to water, and I understand the government doesn't care about the environment very much, but particularly in the climate we're in right now. But is it just up to the PSC ultimately if we want to let these things go and the local government says yes? Or is there any way that we can look at these problems that we know we've had in the past, and all the water that's going to be going to these centers is just going to exacerbate that?
In many ways, state government, legislature, and Governor Trump, I should say that, vetted structures that the PSC has to follow. But they'll usually give a lot of leeway to the PSC because that is an elected body that we all vote for to set these regulations. So they'll give them a great deal of deference to come up with a solution on their own. So there will be this constant balancing act of trying to figure out where the restrictions will come from. State legislature is taking a look at this. They've had committee hearings on massive data centers. We haven't seen much solution come out, but that definitely will take time. But which government entity will implement these? It'll be the one that gets the most pressure in the long run. And don't forget that out in rural Georgia, there are a lot of hunters, fishers, people who make their money off it who want to see their environments maintained. We've seen the chairman of games and fisheries, et cetera, be very interested in how they're going to be impacted by all the new pollution coming in. So don't just expect that it's a left versus right issue. You will see a lot of different forces coming into play on this from all sides.
My question builds off of the last few about the environmental justice concerns of data centers. What I'm curious about is we talked about climate change a bit, and all these resources that are used by data centers, like water or contributing to emissions or having excess heat, which can be bad for the urban heat island effect if these are located in cities. What types of environmental impact assessments are being done when they're considering these data centers, if any? And are they factoring in climate scenarios to know, if we're factoring in like how much water is being used today and how that's stressing on our current water resources? Are they factoring in like rainfall patterns in the future or droughts or floods or things like that? What kind of like nuances are being done in these environmental impact assessments? If there's any kind of nuance or future sort of forecasting involved.
We're going to talk about these, but I don't want to keep.
All right.
So when it deals with water specifically, the discussion is usually around capacity. So obviously in the cab, we've got issues with water check. That's been one of the major problems is trying to get that ancient water system back up to snuff. That's why we're about to be paying a lot. It's about time we're paying a lot for it. We haven't for a long time. My water bills are so cheap compared to my friends in other parks, and there's a reason for that. We have not been maintaining it like we need to. I appreciate what Thurman's done. I appreciate what Cochran Johnson is doing. We see changes on that. But that is what the focus is, and that's how it's set up right now. Do we have the capacity, and what will this do to the capacity? Those other issues are not considered in those discussions. And that is, again, a question of having local government put that, put those stipulations in place that be considered. And in this case, I'm not just talking about the cab. That's true almost everywhere.
And also to the thing to consider as you're setting up these plans and we talk about contractual language is that the technology that when we do assessments, right, it's based off of the available technology today, right? We know capacity, and power and water capacity based off of today's technology. But if the small modular nuclear plants start catching on, or other types of new technology that changes that, is where now they're putting in these huge turbines that now we've got heat issues, we've got pollutants, and so things can't change. So there's not so much the only things we can do in the front end of the studies is based off of what we know what data centers can do today. But just like with everything in technology, it's hard to keep up, and that's what we're seeing in a lot of these other communities.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I'll say for the recording that I'm on this panel because I am involved in economic development. I'm not speaking as a representative of anyone.
Yes, it seems like fifth generation warfare and great power conflict has been driving a lot of what we've already had built out. And it seems like we're seeing a speculative pivot to sixth generation great power conflict with the coming of AI. This seems like it has a real potential to become a self-licking ice cream cone where size begets more size, and there's an arms race, and we start getting into national security elements of this. Is there any plausible circuit breaker or off-ramp from that eventuality that y'all see?
The bubble popping.
Well, yeah,
I do think that there is a trend in the opposite direction, and so we're seeing this, and it's a populist trend. It's people that communities like you guys that care about and understand the technology implications of putting everything in the cloud. Is you've got things like privacy, and we see regime change here in the United States, and how technology now is no longer a comfort but a threat. And so we're saying, hey, what can we do about this? And then also, there's this data center situation. That's the physical aspect of the same type of discussion. And so moving away from that and being able to say as consumers, hey, we don't want this, right? We want dumb TVs, we want dumb cars, we want to be able to own our own data. And as a community, maybe we'll start building our own infrastructure, right? And moving away from these centralized.
One of the big things that's going to happen in the near future is we're going to have some time. We have to actually think about all this new technology that's being developed. How do we actually want to use it? Right now, they're so busy trying to figure out build this stuff to use it, but they don't actually have a use in mind that they can actually do anything with. So they're building out these big data centers. They're doing all this data privacy violation, and they're going to run out of money eventually unless they can come up with a use. And personally, my prediction, although I'm no economic predictor, so take what I say with a grain of salt, is that they're not going to come up with one in time. There's going to be a bubble pop. That doesn't mean this is never coming back. but it means when it comes back, it's going to come back in a different form. And that's much harder to predict.
Yeah, we got pets.com after 20 years of losing pets.com.
I want to add, which, in addition to, we talked about more about decentralizing where some of your data are storing it locally to have it less on the cloud. But another form of decentralization, which may be very helpful for pushing back on this, is decentralizing the handful of gigantic companies that are driving this effort. That we have had a consolidation of power in the sort of more political and economic sense that has created mega companies that have the resources to create these mega data centers or hyper data centers. I think was the next level up, and it is being driven a lot by their monopoly powers in various areas. People, of course, are still using a lot of these services because those are the ones that are obvious. Everyone else is using it, but moving away from Facebook, try communicating on something like Mastodon or instead of Twitter or Blue Sky. Move to some smaller entities. Don't do all your social media. Look at alternative options where you can do something. There are some, they're not as popular, but one of the things that is key for a lot of these monopolies, people are there because everybody else is there. And it makes more sense to be on a service that all your friends are on. If people start moving away significantly to more decentralized services, that will take away political and economic power from the centralized players.
And to be clear, when we're talking about decentralized services, especially when it comes to social media, the big thing there is having a social media algorithm, a social media. What's the word I'm looking for here? It doesn't matter. That can be open, so that you don't have to all be on the same server in order to be able to talk to each other, right? I'm on Mastodon. I'm on one particular Mastodon instance. Kurt is on another Mastodon instance, but we still can talk to each other, and we're friends on Mastodon. And I see what Kurt posts on there, and that might have been a dangerous thing to admit right now.
And I'm going to be contrarian yet again, which is we thought we'd see a decrease in use of the data centers when Web3 finally had its kind of and we didn't. That's only there's AI it's used for it now. There's I wish I could remember which great cyberpunk author wrote it, but there's a point when all of Earth is essentially a giant data center for folks playing this game where they upload their conscious when they die. And the whole Earth is basically this giant heat sink, so everyone can play this game and watch people, their dead relatives, continuing to live in this game. So whatever, I couldn't have predicted where Gen AI is 5 years ago. I'm not going to predict what's going to be eating up the data centers in 5 years. It's probably not going to be Gen AI, but I don't think we're going to have any decline in the need for capacity. I think we're just going to see that need for capacity continue to grow and grow and grow. And that's why we have to put in intelligent restrictions now on how we deal with it and how we allow it to impact us. I mean, I love the idea of decentralized tech, but we're going to need a lot more data capacity in 5 years.
That's a good point. All right, next question.
Hi, so the first question I was asked, the
Wait,
answer,
can you tilt the dot mic down so we can hear you?
apologies.
You're right sized. Everyone else is wrong.
The first question that was asked, the answer ended up with engage in your local government. And so my question is that the most recent thing that I had been reading in this general subject matter was about NDAs and local government. And the article, study, et cetera, that I was reading said that they went and, tore through all this stuff trying to find deals with local governments for data centers. They found 32. 28 of which were so protected by an NDA that they couldn't even tell you what company was being dealt with. All of the local government members who were engaging with the company in these negotiations were banned from talking to their constituents about the ramifications, about the company, about basically literally anything. And on top of it, they pointed out that they bet that there were a whole bunch of deals they couldn't find because they were being hidden under different deceptive names to hide the fact that it even was a data center. So if our only means of stopping this or being involved or getting environmental considerations or anything is to engage with our local government, but our local government is essentially hiding from us because let's not pretend that's not shady as fuck, then what do we do?
No, it's agreed. And this is a problem that the way you describe that is a problem across the private public relationship, right? So, there are tons of technology companies trying to sell to local governments because it's an easy win. You can get, there's certain people that you can convince, need this technology, and then they are the ones that write the laws that then allow you to then make that happen. So, and you're right, under NDAs and having the problem of not even being able to see what's going on in your local government is a huge problem. And this is where, activists, need to continue to put on the pressure, whether it's massive data centers or other type of privacy issues that you cared about, is that we've got to be able to stand up and say, hey, this is what is, currently demanded by the law. And we're going to demand that you show us the information that is, should be out in the public.
And I don't know if EFS has a FOIA session. Do you have a FOIA panel this year, EFS? Okay, so what you're talking about specifically is Freedom of Information Act issues, especially Georgia's very common in that land deals that the government's involved in are exempt from FOIA requests because, it is an issue of then what is the price going to be? It's publicly known they're going to jack up what the government's having to charge for it. That's why city councils and groups can go into closed session to discuss these sorts of deals. But folks on boards like mine are appointed. So it is more who is being appointed. One of the issues I have in general with boards is that they are the folks who are most closely involved and often profit the most from these sort of projects being done. There's not a lot of citizen involvement or interest in these boards. I'm very happy that the Petrie Airport, the Cab Airport's gotten a lot of interest. They're seeing a lot more local representation on it, though there are still concerns about it. The more we see on those individual boards, as well as you trying to make sure the folks on your city council, county commissions, et cetera, are trying to appoint folks who represent your voice, the better we'll do. Yeah, there are laws that say you can't see these land deals. That is the case, but you want folks already in place who aren't going to make the worst ones. And again, get those restrictions in place. If we have this land deal, what has to be in place no matter what the deal?
Hi, I'm also a DeKalb County resident. I remember, the drought of 2008 causing a lot of restrictions for both businesses and residential use. And I've also lived in New Mexico, which is also a very drought-stricken state. Are there going to be any restrictions that local and state governments have that actually have teeth besides just fines if there's a drought and these data centers just keep using all the water? Are they going to have like an off switch that they can just do it? But you also mentioned that capacity is just going to keep increasing. So I can't imagine the data centers and the companies behind them would just willingly stop this, or they might just pay a fine or ignore any regulations.
All right. So specifically with water, obviously that is even more state issue. We've seen the lawsuits between Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, et cetera. I was joking with a friend from Tennessee that since there's this push now to privatize TVA, Georgia's just going to go in and buy it and get that water immediately. We do have that finite resource, and my friends who work in smaller data centers are very proud of being close to 100% reclamation on their water. They'd love to show that off to me. This is an issue. How much can we reclaim at these data centers? How close do we get to 100%? And pushing towards 100% water reclamation, I think that will be key. And I think they know, the data center owners know that as well. There is that finite amount of water. They can't generate more water at a nuclear plant.
Howdy, my name's Pat. I've spent my career in big tech and also in academic supercomputing. And with the ownership structures of data centers are often, unless you're very big, they're not very closely related with the companies that will often just want to rent a few racks in a large data center, something like that. There are exceptions like Google. With regards to scale, there are some things where presumably the bigger a data center gets, the more the capacity is friendly to local needs. And then there are a few factors where that's not the case, and occasionally even opposite the case. Which of those are y'all the most worried about with regards to data center scaling? Like, what are the things where a absolutely gigantic data center someplace is more worrying to you than 5 smaller data centers spread throughout the same state?
Well, I think that, in general, that is it's a great, great discussion point, because it really kind of highlights the fact that, you have economies of scale, and that's the reason why we're getting these big, massive data centers, is that, that's just as we develop and get better with doing technology, it's like, hey, here's a way of even, pinching a little bit more, processing per, a dollar. And so, so that's why they're moving toward that, is that, there's that economics. But the impact of, single data center versus, 5 smaller ones, you might end up with situations where if they're not all run by the same company and to the same standard, right? Is the smaller data centers typically not going to have that same level of, investment in the newest technologies, the cleanest technologies, the most efficient technologies. You have a lot of older, data centers that are going to be a lot, a bigger drain on the local, economy and the local, power and water than it would be, if you were to have a new one. And so like I said, that is, one of the exchanges is like, hey, maybe we get rid of some of these old ones, right?
Well, I know one of the things that we're concerned about up in Buffalo to some degree is the data centers want to be on the Niagara River. And the Niagara River is a gorgeous place and a lot of industrial capacity, but you have 5 small ones, you can spread them out along the river. You have one big one, you have to take a giant chunk of land that built out on both sides of the border. And you got to use it all for this one industrial capacity, and it creates an industrial dead zone. So that's something we're really concerned about up in Buffalo.
Yeah, I totally appreciate your point about technology is getting more efficient, wanting to use those, and that's hopefully claiming the water, finding places to get. On the heat, the Internet Archive, which does start a lot of things, heats its headquarters with servers, just pipe the hot air around and save a lot of their heating bills. But you can have smaller new data centers as well. I think what we're seeing though is that the people who are really making the massive data centers are increasing capacity for themselves and the companies, more these concentrated companies that are doing it. And because they are massive, I think Andrew's point as well, but it has an outsized impact in a particular location. So 5 new data centers that were spread out with a similar capacity would have each less impact overall, because it would be spread out more and not have like the water, have some hot water coming out after being heated for the cooling purposes, when it goes into the stream all at the same point, it's going to affect the fish there. It's going to make it in a way that's different from 5 of them spread out. And also, another advantage of distribution and decentralization is that if something happens to one of them, like you haven't lost all of the data, you can have some massive outages, and you've probably seen this from time to time. There's news reports where a massive outage in some data center takes down services that people are depending on, because a problem in that one area was enough to take out services that were nationwide or global.
And we're talking about massive data centers. They aren't serving a whole bunch of different customers. Those little data centers will have more customers than the massive data center. You're not building it unless you have a guaranteed 1, maybe 2 primary customers. They're going to take 95% or more of the capacity. That's why we talk about Microsoft data center, Twitter data center. That is the customer. Those little ones, I love when we had all the data centers popping up in downtown Atlanta, because it actually provided more value to the people who live there. Our bandwidth increased, our speed went up. I'm going on speedtest.net and testing speeds. My friends at Georgia Tech kept talking about it. Every time a new one came on, there was that microsecond of better bandwidth, and they're going to headshot me faster than I could them. We're not, when it's just serving that one customer, we're not even getting that benefit out of it. So I would rather have the 5 little ones. But
Great discussion. All right, I think we're at our last question, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you for being here. We really appreciate your time today. I work with Georgia Tech, and I do a lot of work with STEM education outreach, particularly in rural areas. We teach introduction to computer science to a lot of these students, and they are very curious about AI. and we want to talk about, responsible use of AI. And I would like to know how to broach the topic of where this magical AI wonderment comes from. And you should, how do I engage them with talking about data centers and let them know that AI is not just magic?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great topic because it's absolutely true. If you're a consumer of ChatGPT or any of the other services, you're asking a question in the cloud and it's doing all the processing and it's giving you an answer. One of the greatest ways is being able to run AI locally, right? It's actually pretty easy nowadays to if you've got a couple of little bit of technical skill, you can download these models, and if you've got a 3D gaming card, you got a gaming machine at home, you probably got hardware that can run some pretty impressive AI local. But understanding and seeing that locally and understanding what all that it takes to get just a quite simple question and seeing that on your own machine helps drive home the point of like, all right, if I'm just instead of Googling my question, I'm actually doing ChatGPT instead, right? The impacts of that, right? And every time I ask for a cute cat picture, right? How many salmon am I killing, right? It is absolutely understanding the interconnectedness of this, but they have to have a concept of what the technology is first.
Are you with Constellations?
I'm with STEM at GTRI.
Okay. Oh, GTRI. Okay.
Yeah,
I love
GTRI,
Constellations
and-
over at Georgia Tech. If you don't know them, they do some great work.
They do.
Not far from. Okay, so you do know them already.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's a partnership with Seismic and
very cool.
IPAT. So it's actually it's a really cool collaboration that we use to reach out and talk to folks that are in rural areas.
Yeah. So I put on a game AI conference. We did the first one earlier this year up at KSU. So definitely recommend coming to that. The next one will be in February of 2026. And I had a hilarious experience on MARTA coming home from DragonCon on Thursday, where I was next to 4 kids coming home from one of the Catholic schools that same day, and they got into an AI war, one of them using ChatGPT, the other using Gemini, arguing over what food dyes were in Cheez-Its. And I was just cracking up because they're going back and forth, and it's like they were generating all these tokens, just arguing between the AI. They're having their AI basically argue with each other over the food dye. But I think that kids, especially in high school here, are very cognizant of AI and are becoming cognizant of its impact. And
But they're cognizant of what it looks like. They're not. I mean, to the questioner's point, they're not. This is such a big problem and interest in is that people believe the computer is a magic box, and they don't actually have an idea of how it works. Even when I was growing up in the 90s, it was the people who were into computers had to learn how they worked. But that's just not true anymore. We have to teach students what a file system is now in intro CS classes in college because they don't know. They just know they type things into their phone and files come up sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think there's a big difference between being aware of the AI in terms of what it does and being aware of how it works and what its consequences are. And it's a hard problem. And I don't know a better way of talking about it than just to pull off the Band-Aid and go, look, this thing that looks like magic. If we're going to teach you the wizardry, right? You now have to learn the secrets of the universe. And the secrets of the universe is there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Intro to vector math, right? So, thank you everyone for coming out. We had a great discussion here. We looked at several aspects of the problem that we have with the general direction of these massive data centers and things that you can do. If you want to hang around and you ask a couple of questions, we can do so, but we really do need to clean out the room and move on to the next panel. But have a great DragonCon, and thank you very much.